She thought it was just another ordinary evening, walking home, carrying her little brother close, dreaming of nothing more than a safe tomorrow. But in a world where skin color can turn innocence into suspicion, safety is never guaranteed. One look, one cruel whisper, and suddenly the air around her shifted. Eyes followed, voices rose, and before she could understand why, she was no longer just a child. She had become a target. What happened next wasn't written in any law, but in the shadows of prejudice that still poison our streets. Her fear grew heavier than the brother she carried, and the choice before her was cruel: fight to be seen as human, or vanish into silence. But then came an encounter, unexpected, powerful, unforgettable, that would change her story forever. What did she face that night? And why does it still echo today?
It was a day like any other, or at least that's how it began. 10-year-old Amara held her little brother, barely 2 years old, in her arms as she walked along the quiet neighborhood street. To her, carrying him wasn't a burden, it was love. She hummed softly, her small hands wrapped tightly around him, making sure he felt safe. Their home wasn't much, but it was filled with dreams, with promises of a better tomorrow that she whispered to her brother when no one else was listening. Amara's world was simple: school, chores, laughter with her brother. Those were the threads of her young life. She didn't think about race, about judgment, or about the way strangers sometimes looked at her. She thought about stories she read in borrowed books, about growing up strong and smart, about making her brother proud. In her innocence, the world was still wide open. But innocence has a way of clashing with reality. That afternoon, the sun was bright, yet the air carried a heaviness she didn't understand. As she walked, some people smiled at her with warmth, but others whispered, staring longer than they should have, their eyes filled with something she couldn't name. She tightened her grip on her brother and kept walking. To Amara, this was normal. She had seen it before, but the tension in those glances hinted at something larger, something darker. For Amara, survival wasn't about playing or daydreaming, it was about being careful. She had learned how to avoid the wrong streets, the wrong corners, the wrong times of day. Still, she believed kindness lived in people. She believed that if she showed respect, respect would be returned. After all, wasn't that what the world was supposed to be about? Her brother stirred in her lap, his tiny hands tugging at her dress, and she whispered, "Don't worry, I've got you." It was a promise she made every day, one she believed with all her heart. She would protect him, no matter what. She was just a child, but in her mind, she was already his shield. And then came the moment that would test that promise. As she walked further, the streets grew quieter, the shadows longer. It was then she noticed someone watching. A car slowed down as it passed. A man on the corner looked too long, his expression unreadable. Something shifted inside her, a sense that the world was about to demand more from her than any child should have to give. She didn't know it yet, but that day her life was going to change, not because of what she had done, but because of who she was. Her innocence was about to collide with a truth that many try to ignore, a truth not written in laws, but in glances, whispers, and silent judgments. And it all began with a single encounter, an encounter she could never forget.
The street should have felt safe. The sun was still hanging in the sky. The sound of children playing echoed in the distance, and Amara's arms tightened around her baby brother as if the world could never harm them. But then she felt it, the weight of eyes on her back. At first she ignored it. She was used to stares, whispers, even small comments about how out of place she looked in certain neighborhoods. But this was different. These weren't just passing glances. Someone was watching her, following her. She turned slightly, catching sight of a tall man in a suit stepping out of a sleek black car. His clothes screamed wealth, power, influence, the kind of man no one dare question. For a moment she thought maybe he was just another stranger, but then his gaze locked onto her and didn't let go. "Hey, little girl," his voice boomed across the empty stretch of road. Amara froze. Her brother whimpered against her shoulder. She wanted to keep walking, but something in the man's tone rooted her to the spot. She turned slowly, clutching her brother tighter. The man stepped closer. "What are you doing here? Who's watching you?" His questions weren't gentle. They weren't curious. They were laced with suspicion, as though her very presence on the street was a crime. "I'm just taking my brother home," she whispered, her voice trembling. But the man's expression hardened. "Where's your family? Don't lie to me. Kids like you don't belong around here." The words stung. Kids like you. Amara didn't need an explanation. She had heard the tone before, seen the looks before. She wanted to defend herself, to say she did belong, that she was just a child caring for her baby brother, but the weight of his eyes told her none of that would matter. Before she could respond, a woman's voice cut in from the sidewalk. "Is everything all right here?" Amara looked over and saw a neatly dressed woman with sharp eyes and folded arms. But her tone wasn't concerned for Amara. It was sharp, accusatory. The woman wasn't asking if Amara was safe. She was questioning why Amara was even there. The man smirked, as if the woman had just confirmed his suspicion. "See? Even she knows something's off. You don't belong here, do you?" Amara's chest tightened. She looked down at her brother, who reached for her face with tiny fingers. She wanted to cry, to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The world suddenly felt hostile, like every passerby was a judge, and she was already guilty. "Sir, please. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just need to get home." But the man's voice grew colder. "You think I don't know your type? Always begging, always looking for handouts? Tell me, do you want money? Is that it?" Her eyes widened. For a moment she thought of saying yes, her family could always use help. But his tone wasn't offering kindness. It was dripping with mockery. He wanted to trap her, to make her look like a thief. Before she could answer, the woman scoffed. "See? That's what they all want, money. She'll take it, just wait." The air grew heavier. Amara felt like the whole world was watching, waiting to see if she would prove their ugly assumptions right. Her tiny voice broke the silence. "I'll repay you when I grow up. I promise." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Repay me? You? A little girl? That's funny." And then, leaning closer, he whispered a word she would never forget. "Okay, son." The word cut through her. He wasn't just mocking her promise, he was mocking her identity, reducing her to nothing, dismissing her existence with a cruel joke. Her eyes burned with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She held her brother tighter, whispering, "Don't look, don't listen." But deep down, she knew this moment would never leave her. And as she walked away, clutching the bill in one hand and her brother in the other, she felt the weight of more than just money. She felt the weight of a world that judged her before she even had a chance. What she didn't know was that this encounter was only the beginning. The voices, the whispers, the cruelty, this was the spark. The real storm was still ahead.
The sun had dipped lower, painting the street in long shadows. Amara walked quickly, clutching her brother and the bill the man had forced into her hand. But the weight of that encounter clung to her like chains. Every step felt heavier, every breath felt thinner. She thought it was over. She thought she could escape with nothing more than a wounded heart and a cruel memory. She was wrong. From behind, the man's voice boomed again. "Stop right there!" Her blood turned cold. She froze, her brother shifting uncomfortably in her arms. Slowly, she turned. The man was no longer alone. A police car had pulled up beside him, lights flashing. Not sirens, just that ominous glow that warned of trouble. Two officers stepped out, their expressions hard, unreadable. The wealthy man pointed at her like she was prey cornered at last. "That's the girl. I call her begging, wandering where she doesn't belong, probably up to no good." Amara's chest tightened. Her lips parted to speak, but no sound came. She shook her head frantically, whispering, "No, no, that's not true. I didn't—" The taller officer cut her off. "Hands where I can see them." Her brother whimpered, clinging to her shirt. She shifted him on her hip, but the officer's tone sharpened. "I said hands up. Put the baby down and raise your hands." Tears blurred her vision. She was just a child holding another child, yet they looked at her like she was a threat. Her voice cracked. "Please, I can't put him down. He'll fall." The second officer stepped closer, his hand brushing his holster. "Don't argue. Do it, now." The world slowed. Amara's heart pounded in her ears. Every story she had overheard about kids like her, kids stopped, kids silenced, kids who never came home, flashed through her mind. Was this how it ended? At 10 years old, standing in the middle of the street, her baby brother in her arms, accused of crimes she never committed? "Listen to me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I'm not stealing, I'm not begging, I was just going home." But her words fell into silence, swallowed by prejudice. The officers didn't hear innocence. They saw danger where none existed. A crowd began to gather at the edges of the street. Phones lifted. Whispers spread like fire. Some faces looked concerned, others entertained, waiting for drama. The wealthy man smirked, arms folded, as though he had already won. "See? Exactly what I said. She's lying. That money in her hand? Probably stolen." Amara looked down at the crumpled bill. A piece of paper, meaningless, but now twisted into evidence against her. She shook her head desperately. "No, no, that's not true. I didn't—" The taller officer's hand moved firmly onto his holster now, his jaw set. "Drop the money, drop the baby. Hands where I can see them." She couldn't. She wouldn't. Her brother's tiny fingers dug into her dress, trusting her, depending on her. Dropping him wasn't an option. Her whole body trembled. "If I move too fast, they'll think I'm dangerous. If I refuse, they'll think I'm guilty." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered to her brother, "Close your eyes, don't be scared." The second officer stepped forward, and in that tense moment, every heartbeat felt like an explosion. The crowd gasped. The man in the suit smirked. And then, a voice cut through the chaos. Strong, steady. "Enough." The crowd parted slightly, and an older woman stepped forward. She was small, dressed plainly, but her presence carried weight. She raised her phone high. "I've been recording everything, from the moment he stopped her. She's a child. If you lay a hand on her, the whole world will see." The officers hesitated. The man in the suit sneered. "Stay out of this. You don't know what she's capable of." The woman's voice grew sharper. "She's capable of love. Look at her. She's protecting her brother, not harming anyone. The only crime here is how you're treating her." For a split second, the tension shifted. The officers glanced at each other, uncertain. The crowd murmured louder, phones raised higher. But the danger wasn't gone. The taller officer, still rigid, barked again, "Put the baby down now." Amara's body shook with fear, but she stood firm, clutching her brother. Her voice, though trembling, carried a strength she didn't know she had. "I'm not letting him go. He needs me. And one day I'll pay back every penny I owe, but I won't let you take him from me." The man in the suit laughed bitterly. "Hear that? She admits it. She owes. She's a beggar, just like I said." But his words were drowned out by the murmurs of the crowd. This wasn't just a frightened girl anymore. This was a symbol of something larger, something everyone watching could feel in their bones. The air grew heavy, every second stretched thin, every choice carrying the weight of life or death. Amara's eyes darted between the officer's hands, the crowd's cameras, her baby's innocent face. One wrong move, and everything ends. The older woman raised her voice again. "You're being watched, every second. Think carefully. She's 10 years old. 10. What are you so afraid of?" The taller officer's hand hovered over his holster, trembling ever so slightly. Sweat glistened on his brow. The other officer shifted uncomfortably, torn between duty and doubt. And then, as though time itself paused, Amara whispered the words that broke the silence. "Please, don't make me disappear." The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in. That single line carried the weight of generations, of voices silenced before they had a chance to grow. The officers froze. The man in the suit's smirk faltered for the first time. And in that charged moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Would the officers step back, or would history repeat itself? The answer hung in the balance. The taller officer's fingers tightened on his holster. The crowd surged closer, voices rising. Amara's brother began to cry, his small sobs cutting through the chaos like thunder. And then, sirens wailed in the distance, another patrol car speeding closer. The question burned in every heart watching. Would these sirens bring justice or tragedy? The sirens grew louder, echoing off the buildings as the second patrol car pulled to the curb. The flashing lights painted the street in urgent red and blue, casting long, fractured shadows across Amara's tear-stained face. The crowd hushed, waiting to see what would happen next. Two new officers stepped out, one older, one younger. They looked at the scene, the trembling girl clutching her baby brother, the officers frozen in hesitation, the wealthy man's smug grin, and the sea of phones recording every second. "What's going on here?" the older officer demanded. The taller officer stiffened. "We were questioning a suspect, possible theft." "Suspect?" the older officer repeated, his voice sharp. He turned his gaze to Amara, and his expression softened instantly. "She's a child, and that's a baby in her arms." The crowd murmured, emboldened. "She didn't do anything," one shouted. "We saw it all," another added. The wealthy man stepped forward, raising his voice above the chaos. "I caught her begging. I gave her money, and now she's pretending to be innocent. She's lying. Kids like that always are." His words dripped with venom, but this time the crowd didn't buy it. Phones stayed raised, voices grew louder. People were no longer just bystanders, they were witnesses. The older officer studied Amara carefully. She clutched her brother tighter, her eyes wide with fear but burning with dignity. In a trembling voice, she repeated, "I didn't steal. He gave it to me. I told him I'd repay him when I grow up." Silence fell. Even in her fear, her words carried weight, a promise of hope, of innocence, of a child's belief in fairness. The officer looked at the man in the suit, then at the crowd, and for the first time, the man's confidence faltered. His authority wasn't enough to drown out the truth anymore. "Sir," the officer said firmly, "step back." The man's face reddened. "Do you know who I am? I don't get told to step back." But the crowd erupted, angry, defiant, refusing to let him bury the truth. The woman who had first raised her phone stepped forward again. "We all saw it. You singled her out. You accused her because of what she looks like, not what she did. And now the whole world will see it too." The man glared at her, but the tide had turned. He was no longer in control. The officers lowered their hands. The tension broke, replaced by a fragile silence. Amara's knees shook beneath her, but she held her brother firmly, whispering, "It's okay now. It's almost over." But even as the relief trickled in, she knew it wasn't really over. The fear, the humiliation, the sting of being judged before being heard, that would linger long after the flashing lights disappeared. That night, Amara made it home. She laid her brother gently on their worn-out bed, smoothed his hair, and whispered promises of a better tomorrow. But inside her heart, something had shifted. Childhood had been stolen from her in ways that couldn't be returned. She had faced the sharp edge of prejudice, and it had cut deep. And yet, she had survived. The aftermath. For days, the video spread. Strangers shared it online. Voices rose in outrage. Hashtags trended. Some people cried as they watched. Others grew angry, pointing to it as yet another reminder of injustice. A child, barely 10 years old, treated like a criminal for carrying her baby brother home. But not everyone saw it that way. Some dismissed it, twisting the story, blaming her for being in the wrong place. Others defended the man, excusing his suspicion as reasonable. This too was part of the wound, how even when the truth is visible, denial still thrives. For Amara, life didn't suddenly become easier. She still walked the same streets. She still felt the stares. But now every glance carried a heavier weight. She knew too much. She had seen how quickly innocence could turn into accusation. And yet, she also carried something else: resilience. She remembered how the crowd had shifted, how strangers had spoken up, how one woman's courage had broken the silence. It reminded her that while hatred is loud, justice can be louder if enough voices join in. The larger truth. This wasn't just Amara's story. It's the story of countless others, children and adults alike, whose lives are interrupted, reshaped, or even destroyed by racism. It's the story of people questioned for looking suspicious while simply existing. It's the story of families torn apart by assumptions, of names turned into headlines, of dreams cut short because someone decided their skin color was a crime. And it leaves scars that last a lifetime. The impact. For Amara, the memory would never fade. Every time her brother cried at night, she remembered the officer demanding she put him down. Every time she held money in her hand, she heard the man's voice accusing her of theft. And every time she looked in the mirror, she wondered if people would ever see her as more than the labels forced upon her. But she also remembered something else: the voices in the crowd that rose for her, the woman who refused to stay silent, the moment that the truth, however briefly, outweighed the lies. That gave her strength. Strength to believe that change was possible. Strength to carry not just her brother, but her future forward. The reflection. And so her story lingers, not just as a memory of what happened, but as a mirror for all of us. Because Amara's struggle isn't isolated. It's a reminder of what still surrounds us, what still poisons our communities. How many more children have to be stopped, questioned, accused? How many more families have to explain themselves for simply existing? How many more videos need to be recorded before action replaces outrage? These aren't just questions, they're challenges. Challenges to each of us to speak, to stand, to refuse to let silence protect injustice. Because silence is what allows moments like Amara's to keep repeating. Amara made it home that night, but not unchanged. The fear, the humiliation, the reality of what happened would stay with her forever. And she wasn't alone. Her story is one thread in a vast, painful tapestry of injustice woven across generations. but it can also be a spark to ignite awareness, a spark to push us toward change, a spark to remind us that even in the darkest moments, a single voice, like the woman who stepped forward, can shift everything. So the question remains, how many more Amaras will it take before we finally choose justice over prejudice?